All right, good evening. It is 5:02, Tuesday, March 12th. This is special city council workshop. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and public were duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Nicole, want to do roll call?
Sure. Councilmember Campson?
Here.
Councilmember Pierce?
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson? Councilmember Anderson?
Roll fella.
Here.
Councilmember Ward?
Here.
Councilmember Goshen?
Here.
Councilmember Myers?
Here.
Councilmember Hahn?
Here.
Councilmember Carroll?
Here.
Mayor Pounds?
Here.
You have a quorum?
Thank you. Citizens' comments is our first item.
No, sir, none?
None tonight. Next will be special presentations. Before we go there, Chief Oliveris, I'd just like to pause and thank staff and Cornet staff. Seriously, 2 back-to-back. Thank you guys for your effort. It was really pretty incredible to watch the coordination of effort. And if somebody has questions around automatic aid, they need to come live life with you guys for a little while. It was impressive. Your team, Chief Cornet, your team, really impressive, something to watch. So thank you all for, and Chief, I don't know if you slept in 48 hours, but if you fall out, we'll roll you out here tonight. Thank you very much, both of you, for your staff and team. Our first item is a special presentation from Chief Cornet regarding House Bill 3594 constitutional carry law. There was a overview summary in your packet. Chief, thank you for joining us. Floor is yours.
Use the other one. That one, yeah.
This one?
Yes.
Perfect.
Stereo.
Excuse me, apparently you hit 40 and you need glasses again to read. So as all of you are aware, last week or the week before, Governor McMaster signed into law H 3594, which is has a couple different names: constitutional carry or permitless carry law. And with that, a couple things changed. Obviously, anybody 18 years old or older can now carry a firearm in public, whether it's concealed or not. And they do not have to have training. They do not have to have a permit. They do not have to have a background check. Training is being made available or will be made available by SLED, but it is voluntary. And they will get this training together. It would be like a CWP type course that they can take. But again, not mandatory and is optional. This does not trump a CWP. CWP still exists, and that is your CWP helps you for reciprocity if you go to another state that does not have a constitutional carry. And we have several states that we have reciprocity for with our CWPs.
Chief, I'm sorry to interrupt, just one clarification that was new to me. Under the new law, you can conceal without a CWP?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You can carry without a firearm.
Without it.
I'm sorry, you can carry a firearm without a permit, and it does not specify, and even in your vehicle now. Previously, you had to keep it in a compartment that was latched. Now it can be anywhere in your vehicle that you're in there. The places you cannot carry did not change. That all stayed the same. You know, they cannot come to a council meeting. They cannot go to schools. They can't go to daycares, courtrooms. None of that has changed for those things. What was that?
Sorry.
Sorry. The signage still exists. Businesses can still put the signage up that was outlined in statute under the CWP, and that's in a specific section that gives very specific rules about the size of the sign, the wording of the sign, and those types of things. So that is still an option, and it still applies whether it's concealed or not. You cannot carry when that sign is there. And you cannot carry a firearm into a location where they are selling alcohol that you are going to consume alcohol. Now, if you go in there and you are not going to consume alcohol, then you can carry under this. Another thing that changed for us is if your firearm is stolen, you have 30 days from the date that you discover that it was stolen to report that to law enforcement. And then they added some additional penalties. One of the things we've been asking for in law enforcement was a graduated penalty for unlawful carry, as it used to all be the same. They did give us that. It's a little bit, it can lead up to 30 years in prison if you're a convicted felon in possessing a firearm now under state statute. And the big thing for us in law enforcement is we cannot merely stop somebody just because they now have a firearm on their person. We can stop them if we have other crimes that take place and talk to them at that point. But merely having a firearm That means if they're out on the beach with a firearm, we cannot stop them. We will get phone calls for that, but we will not be able to just go out and stop them just because they have a firearm. That's kind of a big overview. Are there specific questions that anybody has? Yes, sir. Blair.
A felon can carry a firearm now?
No, sir. I'm sorry. If I said it that way, I did not mean
just
to.
want to make sure, but you are not allowed to stop somebody to check to see if they're a felon.
Correct.
Okay.
If I have something else, I can stop them, and then if I find that they're a convicted felon, then we can address them under the new penalties that are outlined in the statutes.
Okay, I have a question about Wild Dunes. It's a private community. Could they override this, put out a regulation that says no?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. My gut wants to say no, but I think that'd be something we want to ask because it is a gated community that is separate. The law was specific about taking it to a person's house and the person having to give you permission to bring it. So I don't know that it would apply to a gated community necessarily. But if that's something you'd like me to
Yeah,
follow up
would.
and ask, I've got a couple other questions I was going to follow up with some other folks about this new law as well. I can add that to it.
Yeah, because it is private property, although it's not a house per se. So-
Right. Well, and it gets a little convoluted because there's the agreement about the roadways and they fall under state enforcement for those things. So I just want to verify, but I will
Okay,
certainly verify.
thank you.
Other questions? Scott or John, anything from y'all's view? Perfect. Chief? So can I just ask you this? What's the headline about why this is a good idea? Because there's something about additional penalties, right, at some level, but, I mean, is that it?
So it really falls under the supporters of the Second Amendment
Yeah.
and how far you carry that. And, you know, it's not specific to South Carolina. We're actually the 29th state
Yeah.
to pass a law similar to this. We were the second in 24 hours. You know, Louisiana did it hours before we did. They passed their version of the same law. And it really falls under Second Amendment. And that's what the argument is. That's why they call it the constitutional carry, arguing that it's under your Second Amendment. And we did request that they had training involved and some background checks. That was some of the requests that some law enforcement agencies made when we talked to senators and House members. But, you know, I think what we've got written we'll work with, and we'll do our best to make sure we keep everybody in there and answer everybody's questions as best we can with it.
So if someone's walking down the street with a shotgun on their shoulder or on the beach, it's just, it's just okay now?
If you're walking down the street with a firearm or on the beach or anywhere at this point, I can't just stop you for it. Now, if you have any menacing behavior maybe with it, but merely having a firearm would not be considered menacing under this or a violation.
47.
But it's unlawful to discharge said weapon.
Well, and pointing and
So
presenting
you're
would
just
still
airing it for
be.
fun. I don't understand.
Well, and you know, I think where we'll have questions too will be under the pointing and presenting statute, you know, because that is a crime here in South Carolina if you present a firearm in a threatening manner. And so that's going to be something where, you know, some people may see it threatening just because it's there, but that'll be where I think law enforcement's going to have some training and make sure we focus on what constitutes pointing and presenting. But, you know, the academy is working on training that they're hoping to have out this week to give to law enforcement officers to help guide them in the right direction to make sure that we enforce this accurately.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
It seems to me, I just read this brief, that anybody can carry, but if you do anything bad with it, anything that you could get arrested for, then the penalties are draconian, much had a permit. Is that right?
Yes, actually having the CWP, if you, without a CWP, some of the charges convicted of those crimes would give you 3 additional years in prison based on what I'm reading. And then if you have a CWP, that three additional years would not necessarily apply. Doesn't mean they couldn't give it to you, but it's not necessarily pointed out as specific as it is for
Yeah.
not having a CWP.
All right, thank you.
Great. Chief, thank you for doing that. Appreciate the recap.
Thank you, Chief.
Desiree, we ready for the next? Next item is presentation of Waterway Boulevard multi-use path elevation project design and consideration of expanding scope to increase level of protection for Central Basin. We have from Thomas and Hutton, Rick Karkowski, who's been with us before. Rick, nothing like live TV, is there?
I know, thank you for having me. And they promised, I guess I could project, be projected up there, or
I've got it to PC3, which is,
to just go on?
It looks like it just went on.
Did
Something happens
just
between
fall?
here and there.
Douglas touched something.
Did it come in, Paul?
I think if I do the other one, it's better.
HDMI.
Yeah, so it goes straight in. There it is. All right. So again, thank you for having us.
Yeah, come closer, Rick. Yeah.
Thank you for having me, not us, for being here today to explain a little bit of what we've been doing for the city. So we've been working with the city on various drainage and other improvement projects, and this one is to try to mitigate some of the flooding on the back of the island where the tide comes up so much and then it gets into the yards and under houses and all that. So this is a map of some tide data. Most recently, though, we've been targeting an elevation of 6, and you could see there's most recently in December 23, we had this tide of 6.72, which again, this is on the 88 datum. So again, it's not the tide datum, not the gauge datum, but so we had been going down this path to do the project to elevation 6, and that was because essentially we only had like 3 or 4 tides before that, but then we had this recent one, and you guys heard that it was the 4th highest tide in Charleston Harbor's history. They've been there since, they've been recording since like I think 1890 or something like that.
And
So
Rick, just for rough
Yeah.
scale, a 6 would equal a 9. Oh, add 3 feet, and that's your tide.
something like
rough
that,
numbers.
Yeah. A 9-0, yeah, something like that. And so 6 feet was like, we always go to risk, so that would be a 27-year storm. So that would have like basically a 4% chance of happening in any given year, but it has been happening more frequently, so it is getting there. So Douglas and Desiree had us look at what could we do in combination with the pathway project to make a more resilient Isle of Palm. So we looked at, you could see kind of the 3 different layers. We looked at 6, 6.5, and 7, and see if we could raise the path as part of its widening to seal off the back of the island. And so we looked at it hard. You also have to seal off all the drainage that goes through it. Also, the drainage improvements that we have been doing, the 3 outfalls, they all have tide control on it, so those are already set up to do what we needed to do. So again, we looked at it. It gets very complicated at the end towards 41st. We're talking about really high. So we made the recommendation to go to 6 just because it'd be more feasible. Wouldn't have to get easements and land and tying into people's yards and things like that. And so this was our essentially our project where you see red, we would have to bring it up a little bit, maybe 6 inches to a foot tops. Yellow means it's at elevation, so we don't have to do anything to it other than widen it. And then all the red marks are like where we would have to do like a tide control or something else.
That's for 6, or that's
That's
to
for
go-
6.
Okay.
That's for 6. Yes, ma'am. And again, 6.0 is this one, so you can see the red got a lot more. So there's a lot more areas that we would have to raise it. And
This
then
is, that's 6.5.
6.5. I'm sorry, that's 6.5. And then there's the 7.0, and the red got even more. So we would have to bring it up for that. So we've been going down this path. We executed the contract to start designing the 6.0 project. And so just to give you an idea of what we think would happen, this is a 6.0 tide coming into the back of the Isle of Palm. It comes up comes over the road, comes over people's yards, does come up in some people's, in the pipes and stuff. So if we did the project, we'd kind of get rid of that area. And then the people that would impact are these houses in yellow, and then everybody's yards that are in gray would have some type of improvement from keeping the tide out of the back of the island at 6.0. So it was a fairly, significant project, but still might have a problem. We did these plans. So again, these are plans that we identified where we're going to do certain treatments to widen the path and then raise it up to meet the 6.0. We also were going to do some little drainage improvements. There's two drainage improvements on the end towards 21st, and then all the way down the project. I'm not going to go through it, but we had plans. It gets a little more. There's a drainage improvement towards Sparrow, and then a drainage improvement a little bit farther on past all that. So that was all done, and then here's some schematics of what it is. It's really not a huge impact to what the path feels like. It's going to be wider. It's going from 5 or 4 to 8, so it's a real multi-use path. Should have no
8 feet wide you're talking about,
Yes,
not
ma'am.
elevation.
That's correct. Right. So yeah, you're right. And then, those are just some of the schematics. And then we had this, December 17th, 2023. This is over in Mount Pleasant. You can see that way down there. That's a fire truck that got flooded out and they couldn't get it out. So again, some pretty bad flooding from just the tide being up. So Douglas and the town or the city, where you start thinking about, maybe we're aiming too low and maybe we should be going for 7. So we know Wild Dunes Golf Course is doing a golf course rehab next year. And they're going to be shutting the golf course and redoing some golf course. So that's their kind of their plans, their scope of work, or what they're going to be doing. So we had a meeting today to talk about potentially taking our project that's been mainly on the pathway and moving it, at least in these sections, back farther onto the golf course. So moving the protection that, where we would be raising stuff from the pathway to out on the golf course. This is going to require some things, but it does bring some houses that would be behind on the wrong side, if you will, to the right side. So there's those houses that are on the Intercoastal Waterway side of Waterway Boulevard would be brought into the protected side rather than being left on the unprotected side. So that's a good benefit, but it also adds a big complicating factor to it. So we
May I ask a
met.
question about that?
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
that, am I okay to interrupt? So I noticed on the earlier pictures when you were showing all the water surrounding everybody, that clump of homes that's on the intercoastal at the end of, it's Intercoastal Court, that's where I live, looked like a little island.
These guys, yeah.
And so what you're saying is if you bring that path back into they were essentially, we don't really have problems there now.
Correct.
But you're saying we will have less than no problems with whatever.
Are you talking about this group of houses
Yes,
here?
that group of houses right there.
They'll continue. They're actually high enough. They're well above elevation 7, including the road.
Right,
So
yeah.
they don't need anything.
Yeah, they won't have anything
Yeah,
pushed.
they don't need it.
there. Okay,
No,
got it.
no.
All right, just checking.
Yep,
We're not going to make it worse.
Right.
correct. Cannot flood the Atlantic Ocean any more than it already floods. So that's. So we've been looking at. We started just preliminarily. We had a meeting with the Wild Dunes about them doing their golf course improvements. We talked to them of some of our concepts that we would be looking to do on their golf course. It was fairly well received. There's going to be some complications and some hurdles. I think what we've agreed to do is to do essentially take a step back and do a little more feasibility to see if it's really feasible to take it out on the golf course and do everything that we want to do. It would probably cause the project to be phased because there's some things we know we can't do in the timeline that the golf course is trying to get done. So we would have to go to more of a phased approach. So we might not be totally finished, say like in 18 months, we might have to be finished in 24 months or 36 months. So,
Rick, we're on 6 years now, so that's good.
yeah. Well, yeah, again. But there are issues. And so that's where we're at. Douglas, did I miss anything?
I have one more question.
Go
Yeah.
Just quickly. So we're talking about relocating the multi-use path onto the
No.
golf
No, no, no,
course?
no.
I mean,
No.
that's what
It
I'm-
would, the path would still get redone and widened in its current alignment.
Okay,
It would
all right.
just, so that would still be a recreational project, and it would
Okay.
just, it would
Yeah.
just
yeah,
not be raised.
I mean, you're talking about a berm or
A
some
berm.
type
Okay,
It would
yes,
just
I was
be-
wondering why they would be agreeable to
No,
that.
no, no, no. It would just, it would be part of the golf course architecture, so you wouldn't even know what it was there for, would be the concept.
Yeah, but protecting a lot of houses in the basin, to your point.
Yeah.
But is that gonna mess with the payment of aren't we getting some sort of funding for the pathway?
yeah.
So does that take the fixing of the actual, path out of that? I mean, is that gonna mess that up? If it's not all the same thing, and now we're just building a sidewalk, more or less, is that?
I mean, you're still getting drainage
so
infrastructure.
No, no, I'm
Yeah.
saying is the fixing of the sidewalk itself now not as necessary to draining?
So there's still parts of the pathway farther, this side of the pathway, from like say 30th this way, still need to get redone, repaved, and then the drainage needs to be blocked with our check valve. So that still needs to be part of the pathway project. It still will be part of the pathway project. It would still need to be paved and widened. I don't know exactly what the funding source, if it's a mitigation or a recreational, I don't know what the strings, and we are looking into that because that is a concern. We said we needed to check if the grant funding would be, like, say, transferable or
Right.
spread, or could be used in both locations.
Yeah.
So we were looking at that, and that might be a roadblock. Again, that's why we wanted, that'd be part of this feasibility, to see, is
Okay.
it really feasible to take the protection and the plan and move it on to the golf course and all the strings that come with that, including like this, the funding, is the funding still gonna support that?
Right.
So let me see if I can get this clear then. You're talking about possibly, let's say, getting Wild Dunes to put a berm on the golf course so that it would help
Yeah,
keep the water from,
that's Douglas's term, that's not my term.
Berm, you don't like berm?
Do not
No.
like,
Doesn't like berm.
it would be another it would be like.
a
you would
golf course, a feature, yeah.
have some type
Right.
of feature
So that,
That
okay.
would look
That's
a
at
lot
a
like a berm.
Look
that's
like
a
a lot
certain,
like a
that's a
berm. Just
certain
saying.
All right.
elevation.
The second thing is, I would like,
Sand trap.
I don't believe in draining water onto our roads, okay? So you're gonna put in drainage structures, I imagine pipes that go under the side, the walkway.
Yep,
And under the berm and drain off,
correct,
okay, and probably all the way across the golf course to the.
yes.
To the intercoastal.
In the lakes, yeah.
Yes,
And
and
then
and
Into
at
the
least
ponds there?
2 locations, we plan to improve that,
Okay,
at least,
okay,
and possibly 4 now.
all right. And when you raise, are you raising that walkway?
If it is gonna be raised in some places, it needs to come up a little bit, yes.
Okay, because the reason why, one of the reasons it floods now is because it's lower than the road, so the water goes to the lowest point, which happens to be the sidewalk.
Right,
If you raise the sidewalk, then the water that used to go to the sidewalk has got to get someplace else. So your
Right.
drainage will take care of that
in most cases, yes.
in most.
Well, in a storm, if we
Okay.
had a tide
Oh, okay.
that's like well above the level of
Okay,
the
that's
road, there's nowhere for the
That's-
water to go.
okay,
But
yeah.
it's gonna, the water from the intercoastal's not gonna come back. The rainwater's gonna be puddled or a foot or so deep. But as soon as that tide goes
Gets
away,
out.
it goes
Okay,
out.
that's fine, as
It's
long
a
as
lot
it's,
quicker.
but the entire, on a normal rain day, that entire walkway would be, multi-use path will be usable.
Should be, yes.
Should be
yes,
usable.
yes. I mean, that's the design intent. In the 2 areas towards 41st, there's really low spots that we were
Yeah.
already planning to drain. And then the storm showed us 2 more low spots on the end towards 21st.
Okay.
And we added those two to the drainage improvements of the project.
Okay,
So there would be a drainage improvement in addition to the mitigation or the resiliency part of the project.
good, because I might be the only one that realizes this is, to me, more of a drainage project than it is a multi-use path project, because that's the first part, that's
Right.
most important part of it, in fact.
And Desiree, our timing on the grant is still somewhere in the now to April kind of timeframe, to Katie's question of if, where we even know if we even have it. Because I think it's a FEMA grant, Rick, if I
It
remember
is
right.
a FEMA hazard mitigation grant. We have not yet received any
Yeah.
notice from the granting
Or
agency.
update, yeah. What else?
But that we will still go forward with this project even if we don't get the
That's
grant?
the hope. That was the plan.
Our budget includes the entire expense of this project in the event that we're not successful in getting this
get a
grant.
job.
However, the cost estimate that we have so far, it's $1.1 million, and that is tied to the original scope of the project. We've talked about wanting to add drainage infrastructure on waterway between 21st and 23rd. That was not part of the original scope, so that's gonna be an additional cost. And if we elevate the path to an even higher level of protection, then that's gonna be an added cost that we still don't know what that would be.
Okay.
But
Thank
the
you.
grant amount doesn't change. We would still get 90% of that 1.1 if successful.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask, these piles of dirt you talk about on the golf course, what is the purpose of that?
To keep, like when we have a tide that's higher than the road, to keep the tide from coming into the road and into the neighborhood, into people's
So
garages.
you're talking about putting piles of dirt.
In
I would call it
strate-
berm, but
in strategic locations.
strategic line of dirt that when the tide comes up, it stops the tide from coming across
If
the
it's not a
road.
contiguous pile of dirt.
But it
gotta-
needs to, it's
then
gotta
it's
be
gonna go
contiguous.
around the side.
It's gotta be
Absolutely.
And so it
contiguous.
does nothing. That's problem A I have. Problem B I have is that we're setting a precedent that this is something that needs to be done. Are we gonna put a pile of dirt around the entire island? I don't
No.
understand
Maybe.
this.
We're asking Wild Dunes to do that.
Well,
I don't,
No,
I mean, this,
that's
I don't
TBD.
understand any of this.
Well, I mean, you're talking about, I can't remember how many houses we're talking about in this basin that we're protecting. I mean, that's what you're doing. You're protecting
Maybe,
houses.
but if the water gets on the other side of the pile of dirt, you're not. You're
Well,
putting them in a
It's on the
pond.
other side of the pile of dirt today.
No, I'm talking about on the inland side of the
I
pile
get
of
it.
dirt.
Yeah.
Now we got a pond,
So look,
and there's no place to get it to go away. I just, this.
Well, the drainage is
things.
still there. The drainage will always be there. And it just, so we've upsized the 3 outfalls on that end, the 41st, we call it Forest Trails, and then 30th. Very large outfalls, and they only flow out. They don't flow in.
and,
So,
and Blair, that your point about it being contiguous is correct, and it has to be, that's either whatever chosen elevation, currently at 6, it's gonna go to 7, and it would have to naturally end at a feature that's already at 7. So it will be a contiguous line of defense
And
at
that-
whatever level of protection.
and that's part of the feasibility, to make sure that we could get the chosen level of protection, whether it's 6 or 7, along from 41st or even past 41st, all the way to 21st, without unbreaking, because we're not, we want it to be all.
But what don't you understand? So from 41st to 21st, we're talking about protecting all those houses.
Well, yes and no. We are setting a precedent for one. Well, if you're going to do something there, that whether it's protection or not, and we could argue that, we're spending money and putting this behind people's houses in that area. Well, then do we need to fortify people's seawalls? How about Elizabeth seawall? Let's get that up to the area where it needs to be. Let's do it at the marina. Let's go all the way around the island. Let's just put a wall up around the island.
So
I mean,
I would so Blair, the drainage master plan that was done by Davis and Floyd, this is part of what they studied, and part of their work was looking at spaces that get tidal inundation frequently. And they do, in that drainage master plan, there is a plan to basically do this in a ring around the low parts of the island. This is probably about 85% of it. If you're to do this, there's still a remaining section at 4th Avenue, there's a remaining section at 20th Avenue, and we've actually had discussions
this is
at
on
each of
the,
them.
on the backside of the island.
All on the
Correct.
backside. On the front side, you don't have things at elevation 4, 5, and below. That's all, you know, you can see where the elevation hits there, but you don't have this condition of just a spring tide inundating well into the neighborhoods. So it's a unique, this is a unique feature to the backside of the island that we have been, I mean, that's part of our challenges with these king tides is this tidal water is inundating into the neighborhoods. And so we are trying to get to a point where we can withstand those high tides.
We're getting potentially into a situation of spending public money to protect private property. Already got that problem with beach renourishment, but you argue that the beach itself is the public's, therefore there's some benefit to the public. I don't know that we have that on the backside of the island. We're spending public money to protect private property. There's a problem with that.
I think that the lens that we see it is when these roads are completely flooded and take sometimes days for them to clear, it makes it really hard for our emergency, for vehicles to go through, for access to go through these neighborhoods. So it is in the city's best interest to address the drainage infrastructure, the deficiencies in our drainage infrastructure, to provide protection and access to these
And also,
neighborhoods.
and Blair,
Issue
but
that
by
the
your rationale, the flapper valves and all of the drainage work that we're doing would be, is work to protect private property, so we shouldn't have any drainage on the island. I mean, we just built a large, riprap or, on 25th, and we've got the drainage and the flapper valves, and we're doing the same thing on 34th, and we're doing the same thing on 41st. And all of that is to help this drainage situation.
But arguably, that's on the roads, and that's what Desiree just said, it's for roads and for public services to be able to move around.
Well, the
island.
water is flowing on the roads. In front of my house, the road is the considered method of drainage at this point.
I
So
understand.
that's a
and
problem.
I understand that. We had that problem in my house this weekend as well. But that's a little bit different than it concern, maybe I don't understand it, but it concerns me, this pile of dirt on the golf course side, because it is there to, quote, protect houses. It may have unintended consequences and not protect houses as well. I mean, it's just all sorts of things that it doesn't seem to me that the city should be involved in. Maybe we should facilitate people to get permits and put their own pile of dirt.
Yeah, it definitely would have to be done at the public level. I mean, we could never, it's complicated enough. I think we have maybe 5 owners that we have to kind of coordinate this island-wide level of protection. That's gonna be complicated. If we had to rely on every individual owner to do it, it obviously would never happen. And there is, I mean, as part of this grant funding process, we have to do a very detailed cost-benefit analysis, and that is quantifying the public benefit of projects like this. And it has to have a high public benefit for public money to be spent through that process. And this project did have a very high cost-benefit analysis.
Okay.
We hope that, and this is, I guess, kind of to wrap things up, we were gonna come back to this group, hopefully with a plan that says, to make this happen, this transition from 6 feet to 7 feet, it's gonna include X linear feet of new landscape features. And it will cost you this amount of money additionally from what we've already committed to kind of spend. And we're gonna let you all make that decision as to whether or not that additional money is worth the benefit it gives to you. We did think, and I guess what started all this, and Rick has mentioned it, in that December tide, we knew exactly where we had water, and we knew that if this project were in place, it still would have been inundated by almost a foot. So we saw that as, good timing to put the light bulb on, that 6 feet just isn't high enough. It would have been overwhelmed by over a foot, and we think that the public would probably come back and say, we thought you did all these measures to seal the back of the island. The first big storm, and you have a foot of water into your neighborhoods, what good was that? So we just thought it was the right timing with the Wild Dunes golf course being torn up. We haven't put shovel to ground or even started the actual design.
Pencil to paper.
You know, so we haven't really kicked the kind of started the snowball down the mountain, and so we thought this would be the time to take a little step back, analyze it, see what it would cost, see if it's feasible, see if Wild Dunes would participate, see if we could kind of cobble all that together
See if the funding was gonna be
and get an additional foot of protection. So that will be the comeback to this group.
Hang on. Scott?
Yeah, you know, I think the project's already gone from $1.1 million plus to now, I guess, it was $1.6 million. And the way I understand it, Desiree, correct me if I'm wrong, everything over $1.1 million is gonna come out of our IOP coffers. Rick, can you give us I know we don't have a number, but to elevate that entire stretch by a foot, I'm guessing it's not a $10,000 project, can you give us at least some ballpark to, you know, is this 100,000, another million that goes attached to this? You've got your charts here and your pictures that shows the kind of work, and I'm guessing you've done this work 1,000 times. Even an rough order of magnitude, not holding you to a number, but it would be nice to know if we should even be pursuing this extra foot, if this is gonna be another $1 million, $2 million out of our fund.
I don't think it's gonna double it because, you know, the golf course work, it actually probably lowers the project cost, you know, like comparatively. If you're trying to raise a pathway, we could just leave the pathway where it is and move over here and just do a little bit of dirt work, a little bit of earth work. That is a lot more cost effective than raising a path, compacting it, making sure the driveways tie in. So there's a saving there. You know, we really haven't, again, we kind of just started this process recently. It's a couple 100,000, let's say, in that range is going to be the delta.
For the 21st or 41st, a couple 100,000.
The addition to the project. The addition.
Right.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
he said.
so-
Going from 6 feet to 7 feet.
Yeah, because the end towards 21st already meets it, really doesn't need to be raised except in a few key spots. So that you're raising like 10 feet and then of linear feet of pathway, then you go to 20
Screensaver.
feet.
I think.
And so that's not a big deal. It's more towards 41st where we have that very low area and it's a very long and a large amount of work. And moving it on, and that was, again, moving it onto the golf course, we have more room. We, when we are trying to do it within the right of way, specifically the Intercoastal Waterway side of Waterway Boulevard, we've got literally, 30 feet to do it, to do the whole, to go up to height, come back down, maybe put a swale in, maybe put a pipe in. So that really drives up the cost. If we move it over, you have a savings because you could kind of just work with what's there. So I think there's going to be some savings, but there are some challenges. I don't want to sugarcoat it. I mean, it may just be too expensive, but we need to do some more work.
Question, you've alluded a couple of times during the presentation to challenges, concerns, or other hurdles. Can you give us some kind of an indication of what that potpourri of is that we're up against? What kinds of things are you talking about? Are these easy to overcome, or are they approvals, or are they budgetary, or what are they?
There's gonna be some challenges that are just engineering, like if we put up a berm, we're changing the natural flow of the water. We got to make sure that we provide that drainage there. So like if we're going behind some of these people's houses, their house naturally slopes the back of the house to the marsh, but then we're going to put a berm there. Then we'll have to have a engineered feature that takes that water from their yard to the other side of the berm. So there's an engineering part. There's a potential permitting part. If we have to tie some of this drainage into the critical area, we have to get a critical area permit, which it adds time to the project. We think we have a solution to that by phasing the project. So again, that is doable. There's some areas that are just very limited in land. If we get out on the golf course, there's some areas we have to turn it back onto the pathway, and there's just no land, and so there might have to be a small wall or something, and that might require the participation of a homeowner to give up an easement or something. So again, there's a few. Those are some of the challenges and concerns and things. So it's like engineering challenges, dealing with property, and then the permitting challenge, which is always a challenge.
And I would just add, we're planning on partnering the project with the Wild Dunes golf course renovation. So it's
Yeah.
a, partnership, their timing aligning with our timing. So
So contracts, negotiate, who's cost sharing, all of that, and who's gonna maintain after the project's done, et cetera.
Yeah.
All of that would need to be included in the
In the-
feasibility.
In the feasibility, right.
It sounds to me
I
like,
guess my only concern is that we've been, and I think, Philip, you mentioned this is a long-term project. Are we overcomplicating the multi-use path into a flood control? And, I mean, we're kind of expanding the scope here. Are we, I'll just leave it.
Yeah, I think, Scott, yeah, it would have been very easy to throw pavement down and make the path better because it's horrific. But then you do the island-wide drainage study, to Douglas's or Desiree's point, that, shows this area and where the concerns are. Then we have the December storm that shows, exaggerates where we have issues, and we have an opportunity, through this project or coordination now with Wild Dunes. I mean, maybe the stars are aligning to get a huge swath of the island protected from the backside that we just haven't had the opportunity to do that before. So I think it's, I think it's Wild Dunes golf course renovation. I think it's our island-wide drainage plan that came to fruition, and a December storm that just kind of said, let's, if we're going to do something, let's do it right, in my opinion. Jan?
I second that. This is not just going out and repaving that sidewalk or widening it.
That's where we started, for sure,
yeah.
to Scott's point.
Well, if we started there, if we did that, it was still going to flood all the time. The sidewalk would be flooded, impassable all the time, most of the time anyway. What I see here is an opportunity where what we're talking about with the golf course, I think, is really as the holes are regraded, and there's not going to be major redesign, but major topography changes on those holes, that they just include what the work that, a consideration. They're not paying for it or anything. We're not paying for theirs, but a consideration of what we are doing to the side, to the multi-use path at the same time, so that they can grade the hole to accommodate what we're doing on our side of the right-of-way. That's the way I see it. There may be other people that have a different idea, but I think they're willing to cooperate with us and be willing to work it. This project has to have a major drainage element to it because of where it is and how badly that area floods, that we are doing a disservice to our community if we do not fix those elements that we can, because it's the most cost-effective way to do it is to do it now. That's it.
Yeah, and I guess, Blair, I'm still just struggling with your comment. We spent millions on the avenues. We've spent millions on these 3 outfalls. We spent hundreds of thousands on the island-wide drainage plan. So why did we do all that?
On the roads, I don't
Yeah.
have a problem. It seems like we're expanding the scope outside the roads, and now
To
we're talking about
include
protecting people's
private
homes.
property.
And a lot of those homes are very low. They flood every time it rains underneath those houses. Always has. When they bought the houses, it did that, and that's my problem.
Gotcha.
Is that we're now expanding the scope to private property.
Yeah. But I hear you. I get that.
That's my.
But I guess if you could take the swath from 21st to 41st, huge chunk of our island, hundreds and hundreds of homes, if you could take that swath and fix Waterway, Boulevard Road, Cameron, Forest Trail, 41st, we can't even get our fire truck out on 41st. I mean,
Absolutely, all that.
it's an added, but you're also gonna protect all these private property homes as a result of.
If it is just a benefit, but it doesn't cost anything, that's one thing. But if we're expanding for the purpose of protecting private property, that's a different issue, in my mind.
Gotcha. Berm, dirt pile, I got it.
Landscape feature.
I guess what we said expanding, it's expanding when it would be protected. We're making it protected, we're making it protection, giving protection in more frequent storms. It's not expanding, and I guess there's some houses that would be
Yeah,
additionally
would benefit.
protected, but it's more elevating the expansion, elevating the path to give additional protection.
Which houses are we,
Well, let's head this down a path. We're gonna get into
Yeah,
some
I think
detail. Rick, what's the time frame to come back with a broader plan from your view?
I think we could be back here by the next, like, is it monthly?
Yeah.
4 weeks.
Okay,
It's weekly,
yeah,
daily.
Well,
yeah.
let's
So
say a
within,
month. Let's say
within
a month
30,
then,
within
not-
30
not-
days,
Not tomorrow, though, yeah.
within 30 days, we'll have a,
I think we could
come
come
back with a
to.
plan, based on the new information from Wild
Very good plan and
Dunes.
give you a very good
Okay.
recommendation about whether we move forward or not move forward. Just go, I mean, again, we do have a solid plan on the table. I mean,
Yeah.
there is a solid plan on the table. We're ready to implement it. We got the surveys done. We're ready to go. We just want, just want to look at this one last time, and then we can put this to bed and then move on.
Fair enough. Good,
just one last,
all right,
I mean, if it,
last.
easements across private property, is that something you'd consider?
Cross the golf course.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cross the golf.
Golf course, yeah.
The golf course, yeah. It would
Okay.
be the golf course more than anything. There may be one or two
I just wanted to say thank you.
homeowners that would have to participate in
Yeah.
getting an easement.
Yeah.
But
I think
I
that's a
think
good
we're
solution.
gonna, the whole feasibility thing would be to totally avoid that. And we're gonna put the property burden on Wild Dunes Golf Course.
Elizabeth, anything?
I was just gonna say thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you. No.
Rick, y'all done good work, and we've seen your truck out there and flooding and not flooding, so thank you all for your efforts.
Well, we're
And
almost-
Douglas, I know this has been a lot of your time too. and
Got
that's
two
right.
done and a third one almost done.
Almost there.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, next item is dashboard and short-term rental report. Desiree,
Yes.
that's in your packet.
Got it. Okay, yes, in your packet, we have the February 2024 report, dashboard of all city operations. I'll just hit on a few things. Under personnel vacancies, happy to report that the police department has filled one of their vacancies, and another conditional offer was accepted, so we just have one vacancy currently, and we will have another one in the coming months. We have our animal control officer will be moving back home, but we have received a lot of interest for that position, so the department is working on those interviews. We still have 3 paramedic positions open. There is one candidate that is in the process of getting interviewed, so we're seeing some progress there that we are excited about. The paramedic program is still scheduled to go essentially live on June 2024, as we had originally presented to council. City revenues and city expenses, most categories are tracking as where we expect to be 8 months into the fiscal year. We'll talk about that a little bit, but you can see licenses and fees are a little bit low, and that's really, we think it's a timing issue. All of the licenses for short-term rental and business licenses expire April 30th, so we expect pretty heavy months coming up. Capital expenses, we're tracking below, roughly about 28% of budget. There's some big capital expenditures projects that will be deferred to next year. For example, the Waterway Boulevard path, we have $1.1 million there that we budgeted. We'll be moving that to FY 2025. Some drainage projects. We have the FEMA flood elevation project that we're working with a resident. That's something that's going to carry over. So they're just a portion of the capital expenditures in FY 25, not all, that will be moved, and some big projects like the public docket starting this month. So we haven't seen a whole lot of activity just yet. The other thing I wanted to point out is municipal court docket, the number of cases you can see, the volume that a municipal court is processing every month. It's gone up, continues to go up compared to prior years. Now we're holding three courts instead of two, as we had done in the past. And for some time, we had one court a month. So a lot of activity there, and that really is reflects the activity of our police department. You can see calls for service, traffic stops have increasing significantly year over year. I'll go over the short-term rental report. You may have noticed that the number of licenses has gone down from last month by 5. We did check. Those are legit licenses that folks have used to have, sold a house, called our building department, and they've been pulled. Some, I think it amounts to 5. We had 1873 last month. We have 1868 this month. The number of pending licenses, last month we had 10. So what we did, if they've been pending for more than 60 days, we're just not even counting. We don't anticipate those folks even paying the invoice. They may have just applied and have no intention of getting one. Last month, Councilmember Anderson requested some information about the activity of rentals and how free of these all of these rental licenses, how many are active. If you all recall, we did an analysis in 2022 looking at the gross income reported by the license holders. And we defined any of those that reported less than $27,000 as a low activity rental. In 2022, we had roughly 350 some that were considered low activity report. When you kind of apply the same analysis to 2023 numbers year to date, it's about 16% of the total. So 298 that reported less than 27,000 in gross income. We've also looked at our Rentalscape report. Rentalscape, as you all know, is our monitoring software. They report having or seeing active online in an Airbnb or any other online platform, 1,366. So there's about a 500-ish difference between the number of rental licenses that we've issued and the number of rentals that are showing activity online. We're looking into it a little bit closer, but we believe that some of that difference accounts to some of the condos, like the Boardwalk Inn, Sea Cabins, the Palms Hotel. They'll typically just put one listing of one unit, even though they have 50, 60. But now that'll change next year, because one of the changes that we implemented last year is requiring the rental license to be posted in every listing. So right now, so they'll have to have again an online listing for each unit. So we should be able to come up with that difference. And we believe that some of the rental licenses that were issued that don't generate a whole lot of activity, they may not be active at all times of the year. So we'll continue to track that and see how that looks in the summer.
Excuse me, do you mean, does each individual unit have a rental license already?
They do.
Okay.
In some of these, so the Palms Hotel, Sea Cabins, Boardwalk Inn, they have to have a rental license per unit, but they may not be advertising all units separately or differently.
Okay, so that's why Rentalscape is off.
Correct.
And just for clarity, it's the Villages, not the Boardwalk.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
the
that's all right.
Villages. Thank
That's
you.
okay.
Any questions?
Desiree and staff, thank you all. Departmental reports are included in your packet. Next item, strategic plan, policy initiatives and priorities, livability. Discussion of recommendation from the Public Safety Committee to adopt changes to the noise ordinance. You've got a red line in your packet. John, you want to walk us through here?
Sure. Thanks, Mayor. As you know, this noise ordinance has been around for a while. I think we are beginning to make some progress. We've discussed it now, I believe, twice at our public safety meeting. And I'd ask that the other members of the public safety, after after I finish kind of going over a few of these things, add any comments, if you wish as well. We've done not only work there, I've met with a few people, including the police chief and some of his staff. Met with Tom Nolan at the resort, Bobby Ross from Windjammer, David Cohen, who's a part of our planning commission that was instrumental in putting the version that the planning commission brought forth to us as well. And he may be in attendance, I think, tonight. I can't see the audience. But
Yeah, he is,
we can
John, just
call-
FYI.
we can call on him as well. The version that you have in front of you is pretty much the version that came from the planning commission with some changes. And let me go through, my plan is to go through and discuss the changes with you from the planning commission version. I will, as a matter of expectation setting, I would really like to see us get to our council meeting at the end of the month, that first reading of this ordinance. The second reading would then be at the April meeting, and I think that's in time for us to put forth some ordinance for the busy season of the year. There has been some discussion as well, is that we do a 6-month ordinance, and then come back and visit it in 6 months, and with any changes or tweaks that may need to be made to it before we make it a permanent ordinance. So that's something we should discuss as well. But the changes that I'd like to mention really have to deal with the section that deals with with decibels. If you recall, this thing really has 3 subsets to it. I mean, it started out as a residential, for our residential areas, and then this area of commercial entities, including the hotel and the restaurant were kind of included into it as a second category, and then we brought Front Beach into it. And in discussions with the chief, we felt like that the Front Beach area was a distinct commercial zone. It is our business and heavy business and commercial zone district, and we felt like the current reading of 85 decibels was really an unworkable level from a variety of different reasons. But we changed the wording to something that is in the copy that you have, and I'll just read it. It just says, in the GC2 General Commercial Zoning District, excessive noise is prohibited during daytime hours 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Friday and Saturday. In determining whether a sound constitutes excessive noise, section D2 should be referenced. So it refers back to a more subjective excessive noise reading or determination by the officers. Again, the chief was in agreement with this. Certainly, I think the businesses on Front Beach are also in agreement to that. So that's one change that we put forth. The second change, and a lot of discussion, is around I'll call it this other commercial area, which I'm not so sure it's a commercial area. There's been I know the planning commission had talked at one point around the hotel and some of the other areas having to comply within residential ordinances, but there is some feeling that that's a separate area that should be dealt with separately. We originally had 70 decibels into the ordinance. I think the version that you have in front of you is 75, but there's a debate on it. I think the planning commission feels very strongly, and of course, I know David does, that 70 is the right level. They looked at all the data that came from the hotel information. They looked at all the data that came from the city's data, and feels like 70 is a level that can be complied with. Also remember that in this ordinance, And, the measurement is taken from the complainant's property line. So that if someone calls and complains of a noise and they give their address, that reading is taken at their property line. So in the case of the hotel or the restaurant for that matter, if somebody complains and it's taken at their property line, the noise emanating from the actual source could be well in excess of 90 decibels, which is loud. If you ask David Cohen, 75 decibels is like having a lawnmower run outside your window, which is just, which is pretty loud. So I'm personally in favor of 70 decibels, although the version that you have in front of you is 75. I guess the last piece that I would like to talk about is towards the end where we talk about violations and penalties. And there was a section in here that dealt with the 5 repeated violations and the suspension of licensing. And the committee felt like this is something that should be removed from this ordinance. That should be dealt with in the licensing section. And the Public Safety Committee is committed to taking a look at that section or that code and that ordinance and redoing it, but it should be separate from this ordinance. So we've removed it. I think that's the substantive changes. I may have missed something here or there, but you have it in front of you. I'm sure you've read it. And I just like at this point maybe to open it up to the other committee members for their comments, and then we can see where we want to go with this.
Jimmy Jean?
I just had something to add about the violations. All right, maybe this goes, maybe this is this part of the licensing revoking, I guess, is where the 3 to 5 violations would go to the council, and we'd have different levels, major and minor. That's all part of the information, the ordinance we're going to consider in the next step, not part of this ordinance?
That's correct, and that's what Councilmember John was saying, that we removed that section, that subsection I,
Okay.
that deals with the 5 founded complaints. That'll be treated in the business license section under the revocation or suspension of a business license.
So the only part of this one that's still valid is it's up to a $500 fine.
Correct, which is the limit of what the city can issue
do.
a citation for.
Okay, good.
Comment. Well, I'm glad we're addressing the violations and the penalty phase in a different session. What bothers me still, though, is that if you have a short-term rental license, then you're subject to these penalties that you got this hanging over your head. When you get 5 violations, they're going to put you in front of the council. They're going to take away your rental license. Whereas if I live next door, I don't have a rental license, and I get a ticket, there's no more threat to me. Whereas somebody has, just because they have a short-term rental license, they have, there's a chance if they do not go by the ordinance and they have violations, that they lose their ability to rent a house, to where I think it's discriminatory at best.
But that's a valid concern, and I think we're going to take it up with the next consideration with the other ordinance. So tonight, we're just trying to focus on the noise ordinance, and we'll address that. I think you're right. We'll address that later. Okay?
It's my turn? Sure. Okay. Mr. Cohen, it's my understanding that you're somewhat of a sound expert.
I don't know if I call myself an expert, but knowledgeable.
Hey, Dave, won't you come on up?
Yeah, if you could, I'd like you to comment on the decibel levels, both the 75 and the 50.
Should do right here, David.
And then secondly, how do you deal with ambient noise? Like in my house, I can go outside almost any night, and I've got 70, 75 decibels of just ambient noise because of the ocean and the wind and that kind of thing.
That is, I mean, so the ambient noise is a big challenge on the island, and it's gonna vary from oceanfront to the back, where it's outside maybe 30 dB late at night, and the ocean's still gonna be 60. As far as when they respond to a noise complaint, first of all, if the ambient noise is 60, you're not gonna hear noise from your neighbor at some of these levels, even if people are checking and staying below at some of the levels listed in here, the ambient noise is just gonna drown them out anyway. So you're not gonna get a complaint called in because I can't hear that you're playing 85 at your house because the cicadas or whatever next door. So that's you just kind of hope that kind of deals with it. And there are some of the ordinances I've looked at make measurements like here, and then they got to make another measurement somewhere further away to show that there's a decrease and that the noise is really coming from this particular one, and it gets complicated, and we were trying to kind of keep it simple with the police, come out, take one reading, and go with it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's,
that helps. That's
Yeah.
very helpful. What's your feeling on the 75 and the 50?
I'll kind of go through them, and it was funny. I rewatched our planning meetings, and I watched the public safety meetings, and it was very similar discussions in both meetings, back and forth. And the 50 nighttime, what is it on page? Further on, there's actually another section.
The 50's on page.
Right, but
22, yeah, but the big packet,
but
yeah,
it's not,
yeah.
page 6 or it's 23 of the package, very bottom, paragraph 5. We actually had that added in there. There was some other stuff that we removed, but it's basically saying it's unlawful if you can hear, and this was specific to music and voices. If you can hear it at your property line, that one would probably come into effect on a very quiet part of the island, that levels of 40, 45 dB will still trigger that point. So when it comes to the 50 in this paragraph, really what that one's more addressing is noises other than people speaking or music. When we kind of went through the planning commission again, whether it was right or wrong, we kind of caught on that, and we had a paragraph in there to say it's 55, and we reduce it by 5 dB if the sound is primary music or voices. And that got us that. And then when I think the public safety took it up, they got rid of that paragraph and dropped the numbers down to 50 because they were really looking at the music and voices being the primary concern. But we had really kind of already addressed it later on, and this is going to be really that 50 is applying to noises other than music and voices. All that said, now, what does that leave? And that's mechanical equipment in people's homes. And that's where I guess we went up to the 55 in the planning commission, was to allow some allowances for what would be typical. And the one I'll pick out as an example is like a pool pump. Most people have a variable speed pool pump, or they're on a timer. If you leave it on high, running it after 11 o'clock at night, it's going to it might be above 55. If you put it in low speed, or your air conditioner and it's installed not like right next to your neighbor's property, you'll be able to stay probably more within that 55 range. That's kind of just going through. That seemed to be kind of a general consensus of what I've seen other places do and what other people have suggested, and that's kind of where the 55 came from. So that we talked, and I don't know if we got into that much detail, but that was one of the things when I kind of went back and looked at all the changes and why we had done the changes we did. I wanted to point that one out. And that was, to me, was a fairly simple one. The other one was the GCC. It was funny because the planning commission spent 30 minutes discussing whether we should put them as an exemption, and we finally came. It was probably almost split decision in the meeting, because we kind of had the same feeling. As looking that we have that other paragraph that pertains to just noise in general, and it's worked. Why put a number there? So that was that's my feelings too, even though in the meeting I said put 90. So now you're getting back to the 70 versus 75, and
it's kind of, that is about the area of you would expect noise, and when we focus on the Sweetgrass Inn, that's kind of what we would expect at the boundaries of that area, depending on how it's used. I spent the last couple of days actually looking at noise levels of crowds in general and looking at some research papers and all that have been done on that. Still not sure I have a great answer, but that a 70 dB, and this is kind of measured, again, where are you measuring it? Is if it's the edge of the crowd and the crowd's 50 feet from the property line, it's going to be a lot lower at the property line. So that distance comes into play. But the 70 dB is probably a crowd of about 20 to 25 people in a casual social setting. What does that actually mean? I equate that as an oyster roast in your backyard. If it's a sporting event, so if you got 20, 25 people crowded around the TV watching a sporting event, you're going to have the cheering, and I forgot, a synchronized crowd. That level goes up to almost 80 from that 20 to 25 people. So if that gives you some kind of context of what kind of behavior you're trying to limit in residential versus commercial, the 75 dB would be, I'd expect you to start crossing that point when you get like 60 to 80 people in a synchronized crowd, so cheering on something, or again, like a wedding or something where people are clapping and cheering, and then you're going to see those levels go up above probably above 75 for very short periods of time. But depending on, and that gets back to the enforcement of just having a crowd in that environment, chances are the levels are going to get that high. So do you want the police to be able to have to wait until it actually happens, or kind of enforce it as it is? And that, to me, that's kind of the decision between the 75 and 70. 70 gives more leeway for the police that somebody hears a noise, it dies down, they call the police by the time they get there. But the fact that they're at that 70 level probably means they may have gone over 75 at some point in time. That's without giving you a really good answer, that's kind of where again, it's kind of more of a decision of the behavior of, if you've got any questions.
Do you
Hang
have,
on just a second. Jimmy, let me come back to yours real quick. I didn't address are you comfortable if we're going to take up this 3-strike rule or whatever in the business license side? I mean, I guess the proof will be in the pudding and the writing at that point.
Well,
I mean, is that comfortable from your viewpoint, or what's?
The way I understand it, that is off the table as far as what we're considering.
For tonight, yes, but
Yeah.
but you're raising the concern to make sure when we get to that point. that
Yeah, I
we
just
address
want
it
everybody to
appropriately.
be
Yeah.
treated the same.
Yeah, got it.
It's actually on the agenda for the Public Safety Committee to review that or make changes to that ordinance. So it's a high priority for the committee to take up.
Okay, next task.
yeah.
Jan, Elizabeth,
Okay.
go ahead. Elizabeth, go ahead, you haven't had an opportunity.
Thank you for all that. That's very helpful. I've watched the discussions and read the information and tried to wrap my brain around what the difference between 50 and 60 and 65 and 70 and 75 and 85 all is. And it's just hard, it's subjective. It's what a group that are creating 70 decibels might bother me, but it might not bother you. And what I did to try and get comfortable with this first draft is look at other communities and around us and see what it is that they've been tasked, what they've determined was helpful for them. I first went to Mount Pleasant, and when you start talking about residential, commercial, these things, they all have people that use decibel limits anyway. They have these classifications, and in Mount Pleasant, they deem a commercial 65. They think that's reasonable during the day, 55 at night. Here we're looking at 75, I believe, for commercial. And, aren't we? Yeah, 75 for commercial, 65 for residential. Mount Pleasant is 55 for residential. And then I thought to myself, well, we're a little different bird than Mount Pleasant. Certainly they have hotels and bars on water and homes and things, but they're different enough that I wanted to expand my scope on this issue, and so I moved up the coast to Myrtle Beach. Myrtle Beach has the same determination. It's interesting to see what they consider, what their levels are. In any residential zone, they're locked in at 55 during the day, 50 at night, and in what they call mixed-use urban village districts, which is a commercial designation, which I feel like is very similar to Wild Dunes. These are these intentionally built multi-use areas that have commercial elements, they have residential elements, they have recreational elements. That is a zone that they cap out at 65 during the day and 60 at night. Interestingly, both Mount Pleasant and Myrtle Beach deem 75 only acceptable within industrial or manufacturing areas, which was pretty interesting to think about. If that's what they think that decibel should be associated with, for us to then bring it into our commercial districts, which are incredibly close, particularly with the sweetgrass, to the residential elements right around it, it seems high to me. So I'd like 65. I could go along with 70. I think the Planning Commission's work to get to the recommendation of 70 was good. And so I had that comment as to the number. And then as to the pulling out the strikes or whatever they're doing. I mean, I would like to, I don't see the harm in keeping that until you've got something to replace it with. I'm not a big, it's in our current ordinance. I don't know, I'll read it when I get it. But the other element that I had a concern with was the distance in the loudspeakers were changing from 25 up to 50. So, we've doubled that distance with a loudspeaker, which I'm not crazy about either. And lastly, I think I'm still not wild about the idea of allowing commercial property owners or businesses to apply to city council for an exception to the noise ordinance. In my mind, there's not a public good that's had from a private commercial entity violating our noise ordinance with our blessing. Our code builds in the ability for our police chief to approve public events like things at the front beach and festivals and parades and things like that, and that is a public good. They're publicly attended, they're publicly supported, and so I get that, and I think that they absolutely should be granted, within his discretion if he can handle it in that realm. But I'm not a big fan of number 6 either. So,
Mayor, if I may, Councilmember Campson, to clarify, the 5 founded complaints section is included in our business license ordinance already.
Yes.
It's not included as part of the noise ordinance. That was something that we added. So right now, if we have a business, a commercial establishment, whether it's a brick and mortar business or a house that has a business short-term rental license, they have 5 founded complaints could trigger the process of revocating that business license. The work that the Public Safety Committee is doing is defining what those founded complaints would be. And they've talked about having different categories, but that is a provision of our current ordinance. Whether those 5 founded complaints are all noise related or other livability type, that would apply to that. So it is not something that is currently tied to the noise ordinance and we're removing.
Right. So this section that says, in addition to the penalties set forth herein, and this is kind of the wrap up of our current noise ordinance. It just refers you, it says, you're also, just FYI, it says any person who owns, manages, operates as a business agent of or otherwise controls a business establishment may result in the suspension or revocation of any business license issued to the premises on which the violations occurred in accordance with section 7.115. And I'm pretty sure 7.115 is our business license ordinance. 'Cause it's just kind of it's just a little bit of a wrap up at the end of a noise ordinance when there are implications from this noise ordinance that can affect you in another realm. I mean, particularly like in the Board of Zoning Appeals, you want to make sure everybody understands every element that they're subject to. And wouldn't mind just, I mean, it's not an like, hey, but it's just saying, hey, just for your information, you know, if all you've read about the way you're conducting your business is the noise ordinance, we just want to let you know that you might want to also consult the business license, and then whatever the business license ordinance ends up being is fine. It's really just more of a reference point than an element of the actual noise ordinance itself. Just kind of ties the two together. I'm pretty sure that's it.
Did you have a response?
I was
You
gonna
started to say
respond.
something
I
I
started
saw.
Yeah,
and then-
you were cutting your eyes at me. I saw you.
I-
The whole time he was looking at me like,
The loudspeaker one, that was
That's
actually,
right.
so some of these sections, especially the parts, I think most of the parts in blue, when we kind of drafted the original, we had options, so then we struck out. So I didn't want to make the decision, I wanted to present it to the planning commission, and kind of, so that, like, the loudspeaker one was one of them where we actually never had, it was, the way our current ordinance was, basically,
do
you
it at
could
all.
do it
Yeah,
at all.
you're right, yeah.
But we don't enforce that, so
Right.
it kind of became like, you know, the park, or even the beach, and I'm still not sure we're gonna enforce it. But if we wanted to,
you're right.
we were, it
Added
was
the
like,
distance.
let's put a distance and say either 25 or 50, and we kind of just picked the 50.
Got it.
Again, it was, if you can hear somebody, and again, on the street, if you can hear somebody going by in their golf cart at 50 feet with their radio playing, is that excessive, and are we giving the police
Right.
the ability to ticket?
Yeah, I think that.
That was where that one came from, so.
Got it. And I think the part that, you know, the section that it's in when it's talking about, except as permitted under paragraph, city-owned property is where it was, you know, because this is a kind of a, I don't know that really, or maybe it does, yeah, okay, thank you. I'm gonna quit thinking about that right now.
Yeah, that one was just kind of
Yeah.
a clerical kind of fix.
All right, so what do we do next? I mean, we continue to beat this thing to death and have for 2 years now. So what, I mean, John, I know you want to bring first reading to council at the end of the month. I mean, do we feel like we've got enough agreement around the table to get to that point? I know we got 2 readings and we can make amendments, and this is not our last shot at the deal.
I think we can bring it forward to the council meeting, and we have another, like you say, Mayor, we have a month to be able to get in the amendments and kind of, hone in on whether it's 70 or 75 decibels.
Can
Whether we
you,
include the last,
can somebody just,
paragraph, in the thing in terms of violations or not. I think those are all amendments that we can get kind of finalized, and we can address this, we'll address this again at our public safety meeting in early April. I think we have an opportunity to review it again at the workshop in April, right? We can continue to talk about it there, and then have a final reading in April so that we can get something on the books in time for the season.
so
Katie.
can somebody give me some rationale for why the Isle of Palms would have 75 decibels for basically more or less a residential, we're calling it commercial, but I'm pretty sure it is actually not zoned commercial. And that's another question too, because, I mean, we're talking, I mean, we're talking about Sweetgrass Inn. I mean, that's what we're talking about, because Front Beach is off the is gonna stay the way it is. And so the only thing we're really, and the marina is city-owned property, so that's in a different category also.
No,
So-
it would be under the same, it would fall under the commercial decibel limit.
Okay.
So the
for
same that
those-
would apply
so we're
to the
talking about those
Sweetgrass
two
Inn.
areas.
Well, Boathouse area would fall under the commercial decibel, the Citadel Beach house.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
and
used
there- and there's
commercially.
residential around all of that.
And there's,
Okay.
yeah,
So why are we going 75? I'm just trying to wrap my head around that.
I think we're 75 in there because that's the request of the hotel. I think that's the whole point of this discussion, though, is what it should be and where we get to before we do a final reading on the thing. I think, again, my personal opinion is it should be 70. I think that's what the planning commission came with. But, that the hotels requested that we put 75.
We do have data from our noise measurements out there that we haven't seen yet, so that's something we might want to consider if we're talking about a rationale for it.
I mean,
I don't even know
the fact
what
that
it
we've
says.
gone, the fact that it's been too loud, I don't think is a rationale for making it acceptably too loud. I mean, just because they've been making that
Well-
noise is not a reason to allow
Well,
it.
the question is, how loud is it now? If it's not exceeding 75 decibels, then maybe that's one thing. If it
Then why are
is
they asking
exceeding
for
70,
75? I mean, I just.
because
I-
they haven't seen, well, I don't know, have they seen the data?
But I don't.
That we measure-
So
our
that
data.
doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that, I cannot rationalize 75, here on this island.
Does there seem to be some agreement or some consensus on moving it back to 70 in the room? Is that what I'm hearing, that we put
That's what I'm
forward
saying.
as a first reading at 70?
Blair, go ahead.
From my perspective, government never goes up. They always go down. They always make it more restrictive, not less restrictive. I would rather see it, because nobody around this table, except for maybe Mr. Cohen, knows what 75 really is. None of us do, because it's just a foreign measurement for all of us. Nobody knows what 50 is. So I would think we'd do it at 75 if we're gonna do it at all, and let it go through a season and see what happens. And if in the fall, say, well, we messed up, it needs to be at 70, then fine, go to 70. We've been messing around this for 2 years.
Kind of to John's earlier point, try it for a season,
Yeah.
see what happens. Scott, sorry.
Yeah, I would like to sort of acknowledge all of the work and research and everything that the planning commission has done on behalf of this, effort, and their recommendation was 70. Candidly, I think that we are dealing with one property, Katie, I think to your point, but I think 70 is definitely the more acceptable level, if we're even gonna be considering a higher than residential decibel level for the, Sweetgrass Hotel.
So, and I don't know if it might be helpful to GM's point. Here you can see, and we can provide this to you all. I think we've reported this to the Public Safety Committee and to the Planning Commission when the Planning Commission took over the noise ordinance and started studying it. We approached the Water and Sewer Commission to get their permission to install a noise monitoring system, and this is the same device that a lot of short-term rental properties have in their properties, and it just monitors the noise and it triggers you when the noise levels exceed a certain threshold. We installed this in mid to late September. We had it up for a few months. It's not working currently. We're going to be working on that. But here's an example of the noise that you can see over a weekend period. And I think John and Scott, it may be difficult for you all to see, but we can share that with you. The black line in the middle shows you the average noise level, and the gray shows the instances where that peaked, but only for a few seconds. It was not a consistent noise level. Just you can see the peaks. So we can provide you all this. We can look and see. We have their event schedule. We can see how this looks during a weekend where they had an event. I know that usually that is what triggers some of the neighboring complaints. And compare it to a weekend without any events, and you could see what the regular noise of just having people outside in the pool area would look like. So this is the information that Jan referenced a couple times of the data that we have been able to collect over time. Granted, it is not the summer. We recognize that this was not up during the summer, so we don't have the same data, but we do have it for the month of September, and we can make some extrapolations there that hopefully are helpful to you all.
Elizabeth.
Excuse me. Just bouncing back off of Blair's idea that, we don't really know what we're talking about with these numbers, that none of us have any feel for that. But I just really keep going back to two communities that have dealt with this, that are enforcing under this, and that have deemed 75 to effectively be industrial zone limits. And, a quarry, Mount Pleasant sand mines, and in the city of Myrtle Beach, it's their downtown commercial area, mixed-use villages, it's industrial, high-density visitors. I mean, it's it's warehousing, airport, excuse me, that was the 65 that I liked. But the 75 is, their airport. I mean, light manufacturing districts, their entertainment district. I mean, they have their downtown commercial district at a maximum of 65. And to me, that speaks volumes. Their amusement park is 75 at night. And we're talking about that for our commercial districts here, and it's too high. It's too high. I'm not on board with the start high and get down, because I think we'll start high and we'll never reduce it. And I'd rather be low and realize that perhaps we're getting calls that aren't really, maybe they're not as necessary as we thought, and maybe there is some room there, but I'd rather go up than down.
All right, John, it's back to you. Bring it to council this end of this month, and we'll keep it rocking.
All right. Deal.
Thank you. And David, thank you, and
Thank you very much.
Public Safety and
Yeah.
Planning Commission. This has been a lot of work. I know not to push through it, but it's been good. Thank you, David. Next item, discussion of recommendation from the Administration Committee to appoint Margaret Miller to serve on the unexpired vacancy on the Accommodations Tax Advisory Committee.
Got it.
Elizabeth?
So, yeah, we had 2 great interviews, I thought. Unfortunately, it was only 2, but we'll get the citizen interest up, I hope. But this particular seat was an at-large seat. So we had Mr. Turnage. He was a representative of the lodging communities, also serving on the board currently of the Chamber of Commerce. And then we had Ms. Miller, who was a prior member of the Accommodations Tax Advisory Committee, had served a long time, had a good base of knowledge. And ultimately, the council decided that due to the nature of the seat being one that's open and an at-large seat, that the nature of that seat is really to provide some perspective to that board. I mean, you don't want everybody to be in lodging and hospitality. You'd like to provide some outside viewpoints there, and we felt like Ms. Miller would provide that balance to the Accommodations Committee, and that's the recommendation that we've made.
Very good. And we'll vote on that at the end of the month, right, Desiree?
Yes, sir.
I had a question.
Yes, sir.
Who is the current Cultural Arts Committee member?
That's Barb Bergwer with the photography, right, Barb? Yeah.
Correct.
This was Chaz Akers, did you say that?
Yes,
This is
Chas Akers, he was holding an
He's a
at-large
replacement.
seat, and he moved off the island, making this seat vacant.
Yeah,
Thank you,
so that was
Elizabeth.
that, yep.
Next item is discussion of recommendation from the Administration Committee to adopt changes to the public participation regulations. You've got a draft in your packet as well as comparison to some other surrounding municipalities. Elizabeth?
Yep, so that's another item that we took up first thing. It was kind of a holdover, I guess, from some concerns that some members had at the end of last year. And we looked at the various communities around us, as is always a good idea to do. And this is where we ended up. We felt like there really wasn't much change necessary. We had a good ordinance as far as public participation went. We added a few things about identifying yourself, not being able to pass allotted time from one to another, just in an effort to kind of streamline things and keep stuff moving. We did decide to give some priority to people who reside here or own property or maintain a business, as opposed, COVID kind of illuminated the interest sometimes from outside people here to come speak, and we felt like, if we can protect our residents and property owners and homeowners, business owners' ability to kind of get to the front of the queue, we wanted to do that, even though we can extend time when necessary, but also it just kind of, it's a little perk there for them, and that's about it, really. It's not a whole lot of changes. So that
They
was,
were good ones. The only
Yeah.
question I had was on the new item G. I mean, this is kind of what born this review of this particular ordinance. It was just saying somebody's name as opposed to addressing city council. And I don't know if there's additional wording to be put here that would allow a council member to raise the issue to the chair, or I don't know.
Yeah, so G is not new, it's just renumbered now. Yeah, so, but your question
My
is just
question,
about,
not the new letter G. Used to be F.
yes. We discussed that, but, we're not, and your concern just is that you
It's
think that,
very subjective.
yeah,
You know, and again, that's what kind of started this
Yeah.
whole review. And I know MASC just put out a piece on public comment periods, and I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that yet, but it's not, there's not really anything too much that's, you guys haven't already covered. It's just a question. I mean, that's really where this got born, was just saying somebody's name, make it personal, when you're really supposed to
Yeah.
be addressing city council as a whole.
yeah. I mean, none of it, I mean, John, I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody on the committee. Ashley, John, you can weigh in. I mean, my recollection is that we determined that just mentioning somebody's name or, you know, addressing them in any way wasn't, I mean, it is subjective, and some people will perhaps have their, I mean, I don't want to say their feelings hurt, but it may be uncomfortable in that situation, but that generally speaking, we're up here to serve the public, and there could be times when there will be people who address us directly, and that it's kind of par for the course, so to speak.
I don't agree with that.
Yeah, and again, but I just think
No, we
it's,
know.
it doesn't
think our-
have to be, hang on, it doesn't have to be incumbent upon the chair, or whatever committee
Correct,
it
yeah.
is, or council. I mean, it can be the individual calling for a point of order to say, hey,
Yeah, that's a-
feeling attacked, whatever. I mean, to me, that's, I don't know if that's the verbiage that needs to get
Because
added.
Robert's rules, I mean, that still controls. I mean, this
Yeah,
is not a,
that's the case no matter
you know,
what.
be all and
That's
all, yeah.
always, I mean,
John, were you gonna say something?
No, I was just gonna agree with Elizabeth. That was the discussion we had in the committee around that topic.
Again, I think if we have the understanding that any committee / council member can raise their hand for a point of order, I mean, that's, that
Yeah,
admit-
absolutely.
yeah,
Those are
that
the
may
rules,
just be
yeah.
the difference. I mean, how somebody may feel or how it lands on somebody can be different for all 9 members, so I think that flexibility is fine. Jan?
I think I asked for clarification from our lawyer one of these times when it happened to me, and
Yep.
he said basically we're public officials and there's not much we can do about it in the terms of at a meeting or anything like that, so. As much as I
we put
wish,
ourselves out there.
yeah,
And
It should not be encouraged.
no.
Yeah, and again, I think it's up to the individual to raise their hand. Thank you all for the work
You're
on
welcome.
that one. Next item is discussion of
Just a question.
Yes.
So the changes, the red lines that are included in your packet have been recommended by the administration committee. Do you all want to see
Think we
that in a
bring in
form
an
of an
ordinance.
ordinance for your March meeting?
I think so.
Okay.
Next item, discussion of regulations on placement of political signs in the public right-of-way. And again, I know this one was brought up after our last election and the plethora of signage, so thank you guys for looking at it.
Yes. So we don't have a proposed ordinance because we weren't quite sure whether anybody was interested in even pursuing
Good
this.
research, though.
Yes, no, tons of good research. And so, you know, we've looked at, again, surrounding communities to see what they do. And what we've learned is we're the only people, basically, that allow political signs in the rights of way. Plenty of rules surrounding what people can do on private property, how many, their signs and when they can be there and things. But we're kind of a standalone there. And, in addition to these on the list, as I tend to do, went and looking around and also found that Edisto, County Charleston, Georgetown, Surfside, Myrtle Beach, North Myrtle, Somerville, Goose Creek, they all have prohibitions on these political temporary signs in the right-of-way. And with the understanding that the entire intent of our sign ordinance is to establish limitations on signs to ensure that they're appropriate and not excessive, we thought that we would bring this to the workshop just to see, we were kind of bogged down a little bit on it, really. I mean, I've got opinions, and John and Ashley could also speak, and we weren't really coalescing. So we figured, if there's not an interest in continuing down this path, we weren't going to keep beating that horse. But if there was in the greater council, we'd keep doing work. Or
Yeah, Jimmy?
I'm definitely interested in pursuing this. I didn't hear one citizen tell me that, boy, these signs are just great. The more I see it really gets me fired up to go vote. It's just too much. It was, and I put out signs like in the public right of way, like the last 3 or 4 days of the election, but all of my signs were in people's yards that, before that they had asked for a sign. But it just looks too trashy to me. I think we need to put a limitation on it, and I would urge you to continue to work on it.
Yeah,
And-
and
Yeah.
to add on to what Councilman Ward said, I think when people have a sign in their own yard, we know who stands for it and what they stand, and they're willing to stand behind it, because it's in your
Right.
own yard. And when you can just put anything in any right of way, it dilutes the message, I think, in some ways too. And yeah, it was a lot, not to mention environmentally, it's a lot of material
Yeah.
that gets
Well,
thrown away.
It was interesting to have the chart with the other cities, for sure.
Yeah, no, it's, and
We're
you know,
kinda it.
a lot of them deal with it too. We've not gotten the whole code sections quoted here, obviously, but, a lot of them, they view it as a public safety issue. I mean, you're dealing with lines of sight, and it's also environmental. I mean, it's just, again, we're standing alone, and maybe we should kind of,
Are you gonna
Give it up.
pursue it, or?
Yeah.
I would
Sounds
like
like
to.
yes.
Yeah, I'll keep it on the agenda. I don't know if I
I
can
think
get it
whether
on my
there's
committee,
a
but I'll try.
middle ground, I know we do 30 days now, do you shorten that to try it a little while, or do you just fall in line with the rest of the,
20 minutes?
the higher crowd?
Right.
Have to be
Thank
made
you.
out of
I mean, and
paper.
we did discuss an attempt at some sort of limitation as opposed to a complete elimination in the right of way,
Yeah.
but then, the policing becomes impossible, and it's just not another level of, that we wanted to entertain, so. We'll keep limping along on it.
One
yeah.
question, I mean, so if we're potentially considering no signs in right of ways, would that apply universally to everybody, every business, including the city?
The city there is a section in the code that allows the city the ability to put a temporary sign in a right of way, but it has, I believe it has some requirements about how far from a corner, it's a,
The size is restricted and and it's for city events.
yeah.
So they're temporary signs.
I think the size is, unless it's been changed, is 8 square feet.
I believe you're right.
It's like this.
You mean it has to be that big?
If I'd
No,
only
no,
known.
Oh,
It
it
can't
can
be
be
up
up
to
to that.
8 square
Don't give
feet.
me ideas. All right, I think,
Yeah, I mean,
I
I
think
just-
the committee keeps working,
Sorry, I
No,
just
go
know
ahead.
that we see signs for like, Christmas tree, like businesses that, you see those like kind of randomly scattered, and then every now and then, you see like signs for lost animals. Are we like restricting all of that as well, or considering restricting that?
I mean,
We already pretty well take down any signs, city-sponsored events stay up. There's a provision for the day of a garage sale, those stay up. But any of those other things, we pretty well take them down. I mean, it may not happen instantly that day, but there is a lot of pulling signs out of the right-of-way that just happens on a daily basis from code enforcement. I don't know that we take like the missing kitten off the
Yeah, I mean,
telephone pole.
Yeah.
I'd have to talk to our guys about that. I don't think that
Somebody
happens,
else's
but
I actually
happen.
remember
It's off.
I mean, it sounds silly, but like I remember, I think it was last fall that somebody on Facebook had a lost cat or something, and they had put up signs and they posted. They were
Did
like,
we
"Why
take
does
it down?"
somebody keep taking my signs
yeah, that was
down?"
probably us. We do, I mean,
It's a
people don't
tougher
like
day.
it, yeah.
Yeah, Jimmy?
I just want to make sure everybody understands that this is discussion of regulation and placement of political signs only.
and again, if this comes forward, it won't keep us from being inundated by signs during the political season. We could still have 20,000 of them. They'll just be on people's private property. I mean, we'll still be seeing them. It's just
yeah.
they're not in the right
It
of
won't
way.
be on every single
Right.
street corner.
Big corner.
Well, but if you're limiting political signs, you can't distinguish just based on content legally, from what I understand. I mean, if you're excluding signs in the right of way, you've got to exclude all of them, from what I've read.
Well, they actually are all excluded.
Right.
With
Well, I
that, so
think
we've
that's-
carved out an exception
There's an exception.
for political
Right.
signs. So if we were kind of
I'm just saying,
treating
so
them
if
the
we're
same,
going this
yeah,
route,
we
it
wouldn't allow them at
excludes
all.
everything.
Well, every other type of sign is already
It's already excluded.
prohibited. There's an exception for political signs that would go away if that is the will of council.
So back to your committee.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next item is financial review. Financial statements and project worksheets are in your packet. Deborah, we've got a budget workshop coming next Tuesday, so high level would be fantastic.
High level, yes, sir. Just wanted to note that we are 8 months in. We're finally starting to catch up. Our projection is 67%, and we are tracking very well in revenues in all funds, as well as the general fund and expenses. So you can take a look at your cover sheet number 1. I want to point out on the cover sheet number 2, we have about $4.2 million in our regular bank account in Truist, in our Truist account. 2.6 of that we just received at the end of February for property taxes. And we do have some debt service payments coming up. So once those are all filtered out, we'll transfer the majority of that money into our investment accounts so that we can continue to receive that larger interest rate. And it's currently 5.5674. If you take a look at your tourism funds, we are tracking a little behind on some of the funds. And I think that's mostly due to timing of when the vendors are paying the county or the state, as well as just a slowdown in activity. Hopefully, we can recoup some of that income once we get into our busy season. As Desiree said, we have the license periods are starting to renew, so we're hoping to capture a lot of that revenue from the business licenses and permits, as well as some of the tourism funds. There has been, I'm just going to kind of flip through and go into the project worksheets. There's been a little bit of activity for February, and that's just shown on the project worksheets. And if you have any questions, you can just let me know, shoot me an email, or we can discuss. And there's another sheet in there that you guys are not as familiar with, and it's just the cash projection sheet. It just lists some of the projects that we have budgeted for FY24, some of the projects that we are foreseeing to budget in FY25 when we go through that budget workshop next week. And this is kind of tells us where we're going to end in our cash balances over the next couple of years. Any questions?
That's an A+ right there, Deborah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Not that it's not important, but we're in a good spot.
Right.
And we caught up in
Yes.
February to some extent, and we'll spend more time on it next week. Next item is procurement discussion of proposal from CSE for comprehensive surveying of the southern end of the beach and additional coordination with the Army Corps beneficial use project. Desiree?
Yeah, so in your packets, we've included a letter from CSC. It includes two activities. One is to do a comprehensive survey of the southern end of the island, and that includes from the Sea Cabins Pier all the way down to Breach Inlet. This is something that we do every year, but because of the changes that we have seen over the last several months, we believe it's important to do another comprehensive survey. This will help us better design the supplemental work that we're developing as part of the Army Corps of Engineers project. I learned today that the Army Corps of Engineers has awarded a contract to ADMA Marine. Did that last week, and we're in the process of scheduling a kickoff meeting in the next weeks. So we're really excited about that moving along. But anyway, back to this proposal. The last time you all evaluated a change order and extending the scope, we anticipated the Army Corps of Engineers project starting in February. That now we're looking at potentially April, and for several months. And the amount of emergency coordination and assistance that we've been getting from CSC, it's almost daily. They come here multiple times a week sometimes to put eyes on the condition of the beach on the north end, the south end. So they're asking for an amendment, time and expense to continue to aid in those efforts, along with assisting. They've attended a couple of meetings with the Beach Preservation Ad Hoc Committee, which I think has been really helpful. So you have the breakdown in your packet, and this will be something that we will be requesting approval at the end of the month from council.
Thank you, Desiree. Keep rocking. Capital projects update.
All right,
Also in your
capital,
packet.
capital projects, it's all in your packet, but I'll just go over a few things. The 36th Avenue outfall project, drainage project is substantially complete. We're just waiting for some safety metal guardrails to be installed on either side of the ditch. The 41st Avenue outfall, they're rocking and rolling. If you've been out there, you've seen the activity down at the end of 41st. We anticipate that the contractor will have about a week or two of delay with all the cleanup and the watering as a result of the rain that we had this past week. But they're on site and they're working on it quickly. I mean, as quickly as they can, I guess. The public dock and green space project, Trula Construction is starting the repairs on the T-dock tomorrow. We've notified all the tenants there. They're going to be coordinating directly with them. They will not need to move any boats. They're going to be working around it. And then the demolition of the public dock is scheduled to happen at the end of this month. That'll take a few days. Marina dredging, that's in process with ATM, beach maintenance and access improvements. A couple of things I wanted to highlight under the emergency work. As you all know, we continue with the emergency beach restoration work on the south end. The sandbag installation on Beachwood East is complete. After this past weekend, there's only 3 properties that meet the emergency threshold down the south end. So we have Collins out there addressing those, and we are evaluating the timeline of the Army Corps, the beginning of the Army Corps project, how much money we still have on hand, and evaluating trucking in additional sand to continue to supplement that area until the Army Corps project begins. So more on that. And the other thing I was going to say that the Army Corps of Engineers has awarded a contract for the beneficial use project. Got ahead of myself. Under buildings and facilities, the dog park improvements are complete. So make sure you go check that out. And that's all. Everything else is ongoing.
It was a swimming pool Saturday.
It was a swimming pool.
Dog park.
That's not the new dog water fountain?
Yeah, it's a big one. Last item is a legislative report, just a real quick. About this time of year, our lobbyists come to us and ask for our request at a state budget level. So we've got a request in of about 5.2 million. Rough numbers, they are 1.5 million for stormwater drainage infrastructure improvements. Number of places around the island that would help our streets stay dry. Beach renourishment, 2.5 million. A emergency access, remember in the county park, that's happening next, or I think this fall. No, we're not gonna be able to squeeze it in before the season. That's 250,000 through the county park, and then beach access improvements of $1 million. So 5.2 million, we've put in a request at the state level, so we will see what kind of magic our lobbyists can make happen for us.
May I ask?
I wish you would.
One question.
Get closer to your mic, though, if you don't mind.
Or maybe this is to Douglas. Is anybody taking advantage yet of our emergency ordinance on putting up hard structures?
We have had a meeting with 2 engineers that we understand. One of them we understand is working with about 10 or 15 people actively working on it. I will use this opportunity to say, based on the feedback that we've gotten from those engineers, there seems to be a lot of heartburn and concern about the certification statement that we are requesting as part of the emergency ordinance. It seems vague and very overreaching, the statement that we would require from an engineer to sign off on, and we understand those concerns. So we've had meetings with them. We're working on a potential solution to give more clarity to those engineers that are working on it, to see if there is an opportunity for us to agree on some language that effectuates what we would like, which is making sure that the wall is or the revetment is constructed in a way to minimize damage and not cause erosion to be worse on either side or downdrift. So we're actively working with them. We have a call with our attorney tomorrow to see if we can agree on some language that the engineers feel comfortable providing to us that, again, achieves the intended purpose of that section.
Can I make a suggestion? If we're talking about engineers, they should have a professional engineering certificate, seal. And if you seal the drawings, that's pretty much enough. If they do it wrong, you can pull their license.
So we'll be working with them, and if there are any recommended changes to that emergency ordinance, to clarify anything of what we were intending to do, we'll bring that before your March meeting.
Good. No further business.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Off record at 6:57. Thank you.
Basketball is underway.